Happy Wednesday, everyone. Day ruled by Mercury. It's time for us to communicate and connect and talk. And so today I'm sharing about one of my very first big manifestations. And I know that word can be a little bit triggering now and it's losing its integrity a bit, but I find this curious because, of course, I have achieved goals before this. I had hit big milestones and achievements, graduating pharmacy school, getting into pharmacy school, getting certain internships, moving out to Colorado. But the story I want to share really highlights a desire and a manifestation that came from a new place within myself, that came from a very pure place, and why it felt so expansive and life-changing, truly shifted timelines for me, like shifted the trajectory of everything that I was struggling with and experiencing at that time, which was burnout, depression, numbness, buffering, all those things. So stick around to hear the story if you're interested in what manifestations can look like when they come from a place of self-love. So this is I have a couple notes up here. This is the first shift that happened when I started to be honest with myself. And the way we can trace that back is, being honest with myself came from spending time with myself, being alone with myself, being still, processing my thoughts, being an observer, essentially, of my life, and taking that time to slow down and see what I was putting my energy into. And that itself was one of my very first forms of self-care practices. And so to tell this story, we have to rewind to 2018. Rex was a year or so. And I had taken on the pharmacy manager position at the community pharmacy I was at. And this wasn't, when I look back, it wasn't a decision that was made from desire or interest, really. It was more like expectation. And that was a pattern that I had followed my whole life, was do what's expected, do what pleases others, do what makes logical sense, whatever. So I went from, moving out to Colorado in the span of 18 months or something, moving out to Colorado, graduating pharmacy school, finding this community position, working part-time there, having a son, and then this was my shift into full-time work and as a manager at the pharmacy. And that's when things got not so good for me and my mental health. It was a time where I felt very vulnerable and unworthy and unvaluable and unsure of myself. And it seemed that I was pulling evidence of that every day in my experience. I spent most of my time at the pharmacy. I stayed late. I wasn't seeing my son, my growing son, or spending time with my husband. It was winter. So all of these things were compounding. And I started numbing out and burning out and just feeling super stuck. And it's easy to say that now, but what I felt during that time was honestly desperation and despair. It was an every night occurrence that I was complaining or crying or just could burst from the seams out of discomfort. And so that's when self-care came into my life. And it wasn't I should start self-caring. It was I have to change something here. And the only thing I can control is this little amount of time I have in the evening. Although I haven't seen my son much, I have time to be with myself and kind of inspect what's going on here. And that was after a couple months of the numbing and the complaining and the calling people and, trying to figure it out from this more logical place of what could be next and what was wrong, when I really had to turn inwards. And that's exactly what I did through mainly cannabis. Got me into that introspective state, and taking baths, getting into the flow and that element of water. Those are my two, and then journaling. That was how I self-cared. That was the beginning of everything for me. And so after doing this just for a little bit of time, I started to see myself. I started to see my life and become honest with what my needs were, because until that point, again, I had been going through living by expectation. And so I won't forget the feeling in the moment when this epiphany happened for me. I was at the lake walking with one of my friends, and I was like, I want to be a clinical pharmacist. And that was really interesting because it was a dream of mine in pharmacy school to be a clinical pharmacist, but it had been shut down because the only path that I had really been exposed to for people becoming clinical pharmacists was to do a residency, which I, opted out of post-grad because I wanted to have my son and I wanted to start my family. Not that people don't do both, like you can totally do it all if that's in your capacity, but that was kind of like what I chose. I was like, I'm going to start this family. I'm not going to go for post-grad, and it's not so common that people will do that years after pharmacy school. So that door just felt like it was closed. And it just so happened that my pharmacy owner was going to open up a position for a clinical pharmacist, but I was in the managerial position. And so, the very first seed and the very first epiphany of me being honest with myself, and that's something that I wanted, that was what was planted in order for things to shift. So first I was like, wow, this is really like it, not even that I thought it could be a reality, but just that I wanted it. I didn't, just point blank, I want this to be my life. And then from there, things started clicking where it was like, okay, that position's opening up. The next thing for me to do was to overcome my fear of being a people pleaser and express my truth, my honest truth, my authenticity of wanting this position, regardless of being a year and a half out of pharmacy school, not doing the proper steps, all of these things, and have a conversation with my owner about it. Like, I would like to be considered for this position, making it known that that was my desire. So it rippled outward from that point, and that's what happened, is she shifted me into that position, which was so much better for me in all the ways, okay? Energetically, physically, as a pharmacist in the community setting, I was standing long hours, staying late. I didn't have my capacity for a nervous system down yet. I didn't have my time management prioritization down for what it takes to be on the bench. And that contributed to a lot of pain and heartache that, I carried home with me in that position. Whereas the clinical position was clinical hours. It was being creative and making this position what it blossomed into today. And that's very much more my speed. And so for me to just be shifted into the right place that literally gave me time and space to breathe more, to be with my family more, to have more self-care and rest, that's what changed everything and set everything in motion. And I love sharing this story because when we think about manifestations and goals and where we want to be, I could have been quite discouraged if I looked at where I was and saw where I am now and just thought, like, how do I get there, right? Like, it's such a different experience and reality that I'm living. But the first shift in order to make the domino effect was to just get more space and trust my desires and my intuition. That was foreign to me, to be able to trust my thoughts and my ideas and my dreams. And then this was one of the very first manifestations of that happening from, again, such a pure place, an intentional place, and really being tapped into my mindset at that time. And once you have that trust, you build that relationship with your intuition. You continue to follow that self-care path because doing something that felt good led to another thing that felt good versus doing something logically or because of something outside of yourself doesn't always heed the same results. So a big factor in this story is the trust that came along with being honest with myself and by expressing that truth, and then being able to fine tune my path from that point. From there, I realized pharmacy wasn't it for me, right? But when I was in that really dark place during that, like those winter months, I really didn't know if it was the pharmacy I was having trouble with, if it was the profession, if it was the setting, if it was, right? There was so much confusion. And this lead that I followed gave me clarity, right? I was able to see, be the observer of my life, and then make decisions from a place of more calm and more compassion and what was true for me. So that's what can come out of being with yourself and being honest with yourself, accepting the desires that are placed on your heart and pursuing that, even if it's not realistic or logical or anything like that. The very first thing is to start to be with yourself, observe yourself, and most of us don't give ourselves the time and space to do that. I know of people who are interested in joining Well Connected and tapping into these resources that teach you how to manage overwhelm and how to be the observer of your life and how to get into a self-care practice. And the first step of that is prioritization of yourself, but they don't do it because they feel that they'll come back to it at a time in their lives where they're not so busy and overwhelmed. But that's the whole thing. It's like you've got to dive in when you're in the thick of it, because if you can handle your emotions, if you can become resilient and learn these tools that assist with the overwhelm and the confusion and bring you through to clarity and boldness and decisive action and surrender and all of these different things, if you can do that when you're in the thick of it, you can do that no problem, adjusting your life here and there when minor inconveniences come up. So it's really powerful to be able to prioritize yourself and your needs and hear your intuition when you're feeling the most overwhelmed. To be able to focus and tune into that inner voice is what will lead you through those really difficult transitions and times. And so that's why I invite those people, those mothers who feel like they're in the thick of things and they're overwhelmed, to come into a container and be a part of a community that can hold you, that can be part of that support, give you that space in order to get messy with things and see yourself for who you really are, which that's where your magic and your power lies. So what's interesting about that time in my life, and I could go on more tangents about the self-care and the transformation that happened because of that practice, was oh my gosh, what happened after that was I left pharmacy just probably 6 months later. And so that gave me that time and space to be with my family, heal in a different way. And then I realized that pharmacy wasn't for me and I started working for myself, right? And that's when I led the very first workshop on falling in love with yourself. And I taught it live that fall, and that turned into RX for Self-Care, which is the foundation of everything I teach and guide with now. And it happens to be the module and workshop that we're going through in this month of November, building this resilience and this sustainable self-care so that we can hold more in our lives and hold what we were made to. And it's just been such a journey from there. And so if you've been following my journey and enjoying how it's unfolding and how it becomes more authentic every moment of every day, that's all possible for you too once you start tapping into yourself. And so if you want that accountability, if you want that community, if you want those steps and that process, I invite you to join the Well Connected community and be a part of this. We are not even halfway through the month yet. It is the perfect time to jump in, start digesting and absorbing and applying the material. We're having sort of like a mixer, bring your own self-care. We do a community chat at the end of the month so you can get acquainted with everyone. Plus we have the community chat here. It's a private Instagram chat where we can just pop in and share resources and connect all day, which is fun. And I welcome you. I welcome you if you are looking to manifest from this place of self-love, if you're looking to create a life from this place of self-love that feels true to you. And even just getting one of those shifts, one of those wins. We don't have to change your whole life. I don't think that's the point of any of this. It's to be curious, and it's to be on this journey, and it's to continue moving towards the things that feel good to you, because that's always going to be changing. And so if you want to be in that practice, come and join us. Come be with us. Click the link in my bio to read more about what becoming a member entails, and we'll get you set up straight away today. So thank you for sharing all this time with me. Thank you for being on this journey with me. Thank you for all of you who have been a part of this. It's really exciting to share how this process of self-care and self-love has changed everything for me, and how it can do the same for other people, no matter what their specific goals are. We can always use more love and compassion and grace with ourselves. So that's what I have today. Click the link in my bio to join and become a member. I'll get you set up right away. I think that's it. Start prioritizing you. If you have questions, DM me, and let's be with you.